Hit the record button. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Mi Casa Su Casa Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Finn. Today, we're joined by a friend of mine, a journalist for the Lions Wire, and a host for the Detroit Lions Breakdown podcast, my man, Erik Schlitt. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, buddy.
Yeah, man, no problem. So I met Erik about a year and a half ago when I was writing for the Sideline Report, and he was writing for, Jock City, Fan Jock City?
Detroit Jock City, yeah.
Detroit Jock City. And then since then, he's moved on to the Lions Wire. And like I said, hosting the Detroit Lions Breakdown. So one of the things that me and Erik, we were talking beforehand, and I guess I'll get out a third person here and talk to you, is we were talking about Kenley Platt, right? Kenley Platt.
Yeah.
He has this system, this RAS system. And off of that, I'm going to let you kind of explain the basics of that. And then I want you to kind of tell me a little bit about something that you've been working on for, I don't know if it's Lions-specific players or if it's just something that helps you, a system that you guys have used to help, I guess, grade, predict, whether it be athleticism. You just kind of go into detail on that, man.
Okay. Yeah. Kent's system is athletic based. So it's based purely on the numbers that you get from the combine and the numbers that you get from pro days. And then Kent, he assigns a grade to that score, whether it's how high a person jumps or how fast a person runs in each of the different categories. He assigns a score between 0 and 10. And then each one of those benchmarks, each one of those categories has a 1 through 10 value, and then they get added together into his formula, and then the player gets a overall score that's between 0 and 10. So it's a pretty simplistic, straightforward system, but what it is good for is it compares athletically the different players at different positions, and then you can compare them from position against other positions and different players. His system goes back 30 years now at this point. It's insane. Thousands and thousands of players in his database, and all of these numbers are based on their scores. So he has an infinite amount of data, it seems like, that he's used to quantify a player's athletic ability.
Interesting.
Yeah. So my system is a similar type concept. Mine is an athletically based system as well. But what I've done is I've looked at the types of players that Bob Quinn, specifically for the Lions, has tried to identify specific traits he's looking for at each position. So with the offensive line, the Lions, previous to Bob Quinn, used a lot of bigger offensive linemen. They ran more of a power system. Now they've shifted more into a zone, and they needed a more athletic type lineman. So when Bob Quinn started bringing different linemen in, I started noticing that there were commonalities amongst the different drills that they ran. For example, like the short shuttle, all of the offensive linemen he was bringing in all had very good short shuttles. And so I basically just started looking at that and said, all right, well, all of them meet this benchmark. And then I started expanding that to the other positions and saying, what are the commonalities amongst the different groups? I went even further back, and I went back to his time with the Patriots, and I looked at 10 or I think it was even more, 12 years of data on all the players that were part of the drafting process. What were some of the players and the skills and the specific athletic traits that they were looking for at different positions? And then I came up with this system that basically identifies it. So now when we're looking at acquiring players for who might be of interest to Bob Quinn and the Lions, I can look at the draft. I can look at guys in the draft. I can see if they hit in the same areas athletically that the other players are. And then I can say, is this a person that fits what they look for, or is this a person that doesn't? When I use this and I apply it, I can take the field of 500 different players and I can narrow it down to about 200. And then I put those 200 out there for fans. And then that gives fans a more narrowed focus on who to concentrate on, rather than being overwhelmed by the hundreds of players that the Lions could potentially look at. I try and give them kind of more specific details. If they need, for example, they need defensive help, right? They need front seven help on defense. And so we think that they're going to go early in the draft. And so I say, all right, well, these are all the guys that fit athletically that are probably going to go into the range that the Lions will target them. And it gives them about 20 or 30 guys to focus on rather than, it's more, narrowing it down, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. While you were talking, especially about the offensive alignment stuff with your system, one of the things that popped to mind was when we were under Lombardi, who was our offensive coordinator, we drafted a guy, Laken Tomlinson, and we were very much a zone system at that time, at least from what I saw on tape. And it was very interesting. If you look at Laken Tomlinson's draft profile and what he was as a prospect, the words were not very athletic, but a powerful man mover. A powerful man mover that's not athletic doesn't fit in the zone system. So no surprise. So my question to you now is, now that we've kind of tackled offensive line positions, we got left tackle, hopefully down for the next decade. Center, Travis Swanson has been one of the more underrated centers in the league. Centers aren't very high profile players to begin with. I don't know too many guys who can name 10 starting NFL centers that aren't, journalists and guys that do this all the time. But right guard, obviously, you got TJ, right tackle. Do you think right tackle is a position that we address, or do we feel like Wagner is the guy?
No, I think they spent enough money on Wagner that they feel confident he's the right tackle. And just to quick note, like Swanson, he moved on this offseason. They've moved Glasgow into center. He was their Glasgow was their left guard. Glasgow's going to be their center this year. So they're going to be looking at a left guard, but I feel like they feel confident at both tackle positions. They made Wagner pretty high paid last offseason to hold that down. With Decker involved, he's solidified that spot. So they've got 4 offensive line spots, I think, pretty well established. And with the depth of the interior offensive line in this draft, I wouldn't be surprised to see them take a guard in the 2nd or 3rd round and really try to solidify that offensive line in front of Stafford.
Right. I've seen a couple mocks talk a little bit about, going even in the first. I know there's this constant battle on Twitter. The biggest one that I see offensive lineman mocked to Detroit is Will Hernandez. That seems to be the kind of guy that's going to fall late. We don't expect Quentin Nelson to drop.
No.
This is a very guard-heavy draft. We're fine at tackle. We don't need to reach at anybody. Does Will fit the system that you've been working? Does he fit the Bob Quinn system, or is it just something that we just see that we need a guard and we see that he's the highest guard available and people want to take him?
Yeah, well, so my system is called the QIB system. It's the Quinn Influenced Benchmark systems. And the way that I rank guys is if they pass all the categories, I call them a full qualifier. If they pass 75% of the categories, that's a partial. And if they pass less than 75, then I don't qualify them. I call them a miss. So with Will Hernandez, he passes all of them. He's a full qualifier. Quentin Nelson, he didn't do one of the categories. So technically he only is a partial qualifier. He probably would have been a full qualifier. But guys like Isaiah Wynn and Billy Price, who had shoulder injuries, they didn't do any athletic testing. So I don't know where they fit athletically based on film, though, because film is obviously, while we're talking numbers, film is still an integral part of any evaluation process. I would think Isaiah Wynn and Billy Price would both fit into the style of system that they are looking for. And so, those guys at the top, they all look really good. I've been told now they're not going to go offensive guard in the first round. I've been told they're looking at it on day 2. So if you're looking at guys on day 2, Austin Corbett makes a lot of sense. Frank Ragnow, the center from Arkansas, makes a lot of sense. Maybe even a little bit further down, like Braden Smith from Auburn and Mason Cole. All of these guys fit perfectly for what the Lions are looking to do. Will Hernandez would be a guy that I would like in the first round, but I don't think the Lions would take him in the first round.
Right. I think the only situation you see is that those kind of top pass rushers end up getting a little bit earlier than we think. So, so I guess we'll tackle that next, right, as we're kind of on the Lions draft path here. So, for those who aren't familiar with the Detroit Lions pass rush, it's kind of been very confusing. We've had Ziggy Ansah, who's been a Pro Bowler before. He was coming off, I want to say, the 2016 season with the Pro Bowl or 2015 season. One of the two. Actually, it was 2015 because I was at that Pro Bowl when I was living in Hawaii. So it was coming off the 2015 season. So he was a Pro Bowler, had a great season. And then he got hurt, and he had a 2-sack season. During that time, Kerry Hyder, he was an interior lineman and lost a lot of weight in the offseason. Flashed for about half a season, and then it really slowed down. And then he
tore his Achilles.
Right, and then he tore his Achilles. So now we're talking about, explosion, what can happen. So, that happened last year. Anthony Zettel, who was a pass rusher at Penn State, who was a cross of Carl Nassib, actually, was his counterpart over at Penn State. Zettel's impressed at times, but I think we all agree he's more of a rotational pass rusher. I think he's the kind of guy who can come in fresh and really tear it up on pass rushing downs, but I need to see more from him in run defense. Interior lineman, Halodi's gone. Got Ashawn Robinson. Who was our other interior lineman?
They signed Sylvester Williams.
Who Denver guy, bounced around the league a little bit, right?
Yep, was in Tennessee last year. He's a pure nose.
Yeah. I went to high school with a guy who played behind him at UNC. So I've always had this weird thing for Sylvester Williams because I wanted my buddy to start. But he's a good, talented player, man. But so the Lions are looking to address the defensive end position, mainly because we went and grabbed Gerard Davis last year at linebacker. Signed a Giants linebacker. We've always been notoriously small grouped at linebacker. We grabbed corner last year early in the draft. I want to say second round, right? We grabbed Tees.
Yep.
So I don't think there's a lot of addressing the secondary. Glover's locked down. Killebrew's there. Did we keep Tavon?
They re-signed him, yes.
Okay, they signed. Well, I remember that. Yep. Slay, obviously, we're talking about top 5 arguable corner in the league. Quandre Diggs, we still keeping Quandre in the nickel. Is that looking like something we replaced?
Or safety. He'll probably play nickel or safety. And then with Law, they re-signed Nevin Lawson, who can play nickel or outside. And then they signed Deshaun Shedd from Seattle, who can play outside, inside, and safety. So they have a lot of really flexible guys in that secondary right now that can play multiple spots, which fits in really well to what Patricia looks for in his back end defenders.
Right, and it probably looks like they're wanting Tees to kind of fill in the Nevin's role.
It would be nice. Yes, yeah. Ideally,
there's complaints about speed, but that the play speed and combine speed are going to be very different. Now, obviously, there's the streak, there's the deep ball, but having a guy like Glover back there really kind of helps negate some of those issues. But the big glaring thing, like we said before, is that pass rush position. So who do you see as the guys that we're eyeing, and which one kind of presents the best fit for us early and then maybe late in the draft as well?
Okay. So the big thing with Patricia's defense is that it's a multiple defense, right? So it is going to alternate between 4-man fronts and 3-man fronts. So when they run their 3-man fronts, they're going to use Devin Kennard, the linebacker that they just signed, as kind of their edge pass rusher, I believe. So he will be blitzing a lot from, I guess, what in the Patriot system they call it the jack linebacker. It's kind of a hybrid. He can also put his hand in the dirt so that they can flex between a 3- and 4-man front with him. But he's never really been a full-time starter, so they need somebody to back him up. And ideally, they would be able to get someone that can not only back up Kennard, but that can also back up Ansah and introduce some pass rush to a guy who puts his hand in the dirt quite a bit. Now, you mentioned Zettel, who was arguably the most improved player on the Lions team last year. He's right now the backup for Ansah, and that's okay with me. And I think if they switch to a 4-3, Zettel can shift over and play the opposite defensive end when they need to. There's a lot of variation that can happen, but I think as far as a pass rusher, what they're looking for is somebody that can play a hybrid role that can alternate between a down defensive end and a stand-up kind of 3-4 edge rusher, like what they're expecting out of Kennard. So when you look at the draft, the top guys are Harold Landry would be ideal. There's a connection with Harold Landry to the Lions with their defensive coordinator, Pasqualani, who was Harold Landry's position coach last year, and now the Lions defensive coordinator. And then you have Marcus Davenport, who was at the University of Texas San Antonio last year. His position coach last year at University of Texas San Antonio was Bo Davis. Bo Davis is now the Detroit Lions defensive line coach. So there's a connection with Marcus Davenport as well. Both these players are full qualifiers in my system, which means they meet athletically what the Lions are looking for. So if I had to put a target on two guys that I think they'd be looking at pick 20 in the first round, it'd be Harold Landry and Marcus Davenport. Now, those guys might go earlier than 20. It's possible. But I really think those are the targets as of today. As we go, if they don't hit on one of those guys, let's say they go guard in the first round or something like that, or they go defensive line, they could look at a guy like Lorenzo Carter, maybe in the second round. Maybe they trade back from 20 and they want to get a guy like Lorenzo Carter. He's another he played basically like the jack position at Georgia, where he was a linebacker, but he was a pass rusher. There's some other defensive ends like Sam Hubbard, Duke Ejiofor from Wake Forest. Those are guys that were pass rushing defensive ends at their colleges, but they have the athletic flexibility to stand up potentially. And there's a handful of other guys that you can find in day two, like that Josh Sweat, Okoronkwo from Oklahoma, Nwosu from USC. All these guys kind of fit what the Lions are looking for. If it goes all the way down to day three, I think there's a handful of guys like I think Arden Key out of LSU might fall to day three. If that happens. He's a guy who the Lions might target in the fourth round. Hercules Mataafa is another good name to know. I'd love to see what he could do in this system. I think he has a lot of potential for that spot.
Washington State, right?
Yes. Played defensive tackle at Washington State.
Yeah,
so
he was a little heavier, but he looked good at the combine from what I saw.
Well, he's 254, right? Okay. And honestly, the position that it calls for a guy to be at about 260. And so that he fits right in from a weight perspective. So there's a handful of guys like that I think will really be appealing to the Lions, either at the top, in the middle, or early day three. I think once you get off of early day three, then you're getting to just situational pass rushers. And I think, you're not going to get as much of an impact. And I think they're looking to get an impact edge rusher early.
Got you. Yeah, I think I agree with you. And I think that's the best fit. And I want to point to the beginning of last season where when Haloti Ngata was healthy, we were a top 5 run defense team.
Yes.
And people don't realize that it was very low key and we didn't play chumps. We played some talented rushing teams. I want to say we played the Cardinals with DJ. We played the Falcons with their two-headed attack with Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman. And something that when Haloti went down, it just dropped and that completely exposed. And I think one of the big shifts is we've always kind of been a primary nickel defense. I mean, most NFL teams are nickel based now, but we're hardcore nickel based. We've been doing that since the Schwartz days and probably even further back. So what I like with this is, and I want to see with this new Patricia defense, is those hybrid fronts and its ability to stop the run. Because we know, I mean, if you watch Detroit Lions football last year, one of the biggest things that stood out to me was from the previous years was if a ball gets tipped up in the air, or if there's if there's a high pass, it always felt like it would end up incomplete, or a running back would kind of be held up, about to get tackled, and he would end up just going down. And then last year, it was like every tipped ball was caught. Just DBs constantly punching the football out. I put up a video yesterday on our network about I did a little talk about 3rd and long situations. How everybody knows a guy who screams at running a halfback draw on 3rd and 19, and it's like it's 3rd and 19, like the drive's over. But one of the big things that I looked at was the Steelers Lions game, because it was very close. Both defense played really good game, forced a lot of 3rd and longs, and you just jump out at the tape of Quandre Diggs just all over the place. These DBs, I mean, ball gets tipped up and we're just making diving plays on them. And that's
Yeah.
what I really like. So what I want to see now is readdressing that run defense. Because when we are a top 5 run defense, when we get interior pressure and clog up those lanes, we really do become a top defense in the NFL. That plus Stafford is the recipe for playoff success. And we saw that when we went to the playoffs 2016, where that defense started winning games and started really meshing. And then we made that run. Yeah, we lost the last 3 in a row to give up the division, but still a playoff kind of team. Davenport, do you feel Davenport? I mean, he's a small school guy, right? Do you feel like he's going to be a first round kind of guy, or?
Yeah, I think Davenport is going to go in the first, and he, in a lot of ways, he's getting the Ziggy Ansah comp, and for a lot of reasons. And I think, he's tall, he's athletic, he comes from a smaller, a non-Power 5 school. His technique is pretty raw. He's right now just winning on athleticism, but he has that potential to explode and be this kind of dominant athlete that we've seen from times out of Ziggy when he's healthy. But what we haven't seen out of Davenport is just that consistency, I guess. And I think that he's going to go early to a team that's willing to take that gamble on him. Now, will it be Detroit at 20? It could be. I know he's very much in the mix for them, but it could also be earlier. You could see a team like the Bears at 8 go up or want to grab him because he has that ceiling. Now, I don't think his ceiling is as high as Ansah's. There's a reason Ansah went in the top 5, and if Davenport's was that high, I think he would be in that top 5 conversation. But I think it's a little bit lower. But he's powerful. He's got like just raw power that you off that edge. He can set it. He's just not refined. I guess if you have a coach where you on him more, then he's going to be a top pick, and he might go before 20. I think what the Lions will do to address like the run stopping is they're going to need somebody like Davenport to help back up Kennard to kind of be that kind of edge setter when they're in like a base defense. By the side note, I agree. I think they're going to stay in nickel a lot. I think they're going to run like a base like 3-3-5 is what I think you're going to see out of them just because of the types of players that they have,
especially versatility in the DB,
right? And
5 to
yes, tons of versatility. I would love to see them keep 5 out there. They just have so many players that can play. I don't see how you can't keep 5 out there almost all the time. Which means if you do get somebody to back up and rotate with Kennard and Ansah, you're still probably going to draft an interior defender as well to help that run stopping. And so if it's not Davenport or Landry in that first round, I'm feeling they could be looking at somebody like Mo Hurst or Vita Vea or Deron Payne if one of them happened to be there. Right. Tavon Bryan's a guy a lot of people like. I'm not as high on him as others, but I think Hurst, Vea, Payne, you could see them go at 20 as well. And if they don't happen, there's still a handful of guys that can kind of fit in, give them that interior pass rush, help strengthen against the run. I'm expecting to get both edge and interior defensive line in the first 4 picks, just because those are 2 very obvious needs that you pointed out earlier.
Yeah, and that's why I was very high on Vita, is because because obviously I've seen raw Polynesian power before, having coached Hawaii. But just the night and day difference between Haloti Ngata being in, and not that it's the same as Haloti, but I mean, if you think of a prospect that he's drawing comparisons to, it's Ngata, very powerful guy, very strong inside, and if Kennard is the kind of guy. Because what I'm thinking, if Kennard is the kind of guy who can put his hand in the dirt and kind of play, I want to say almost the Kyle Van Noy role that Kyle Van Noy had in New England's system, because Van Noy was a 3-4 pass rusher at Boise State, if I believe.
Yeah, well, yes, he was part of their. Yeah, he was a blitzing linebacker at BYU.
Oh, BYU. Sorry, not Boise, but BYU. But all out in that little area. Yeah. But yeah, I would like to see Vita if guys like Harold Landry are gone, if guys like Davenport are gone. Obviously, any addressing of that defensive line helps out. So let's kind of shift over. Do you have anything to add on? I know you just.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, no, Vita would be ideal. I would take Vita over Davenport in a heartbeat. I think
Okay.
what he could do is to this defense would be like, it would have a ripple effect
Right.
on everything that it happens on out. And like Vita, or I'm sorry, like Nada, I don't think that he's necessarily like a nose tackle only, which you get, with a lot of these Polynesian players, is that people think, okay, they're so big and powerful, they got to play the nose. He's not like that. And just like Nada wasn't like that, he can play at different points along that line. And with Ashawn can play kind of two spots in this defense as well. So putting those two next to each other would be a very hefty front, and it would be very hard to run on.
Yep.
And if you can get that pass rushing from, other areas, like Patricia uses a lot of blitzing from the defensive backs or the linebackers. And so now if you have Ansah, Vay, Ashawn, and then you can start bringing pressure from other spots. This is it changes your whole scheme, your whole system. It would be, in my opinion, Vay and Landry would be the dream. Right after that, Hurst, I think, would be incredible in Detroit's system. I think he would be more as like they're kind of switching between their 3 technique and 5 technique, depending on what front, 3 or 4 main front that they ran. But Hurst has that penetrating ability that, not a lot of other guys have. And if you add that to the mix, now you can bring pressure in a lot of different ways. So while Vay and Hurst are different players, they both have the ability to really change the look of that front and be able to bring pressure from a whole variety of different ways. So I would love to see one of those two at 20 if they happen to be there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's the move, which kind of hurts, kind of sets you back a little bit in other areas. And what I'm going to bring up is the running back position.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's just a very running back heavy draft within these first 2 rounds. And I also hear a lot of people calling for Amir Abdullah's head. Obviously, we're fine at receiver. We have very cheap receiving core. I think we're all ready.
4 guys.
Right. I think we're ready for Galladay to explode this year. I think TJ Jones is probably the best number 4 wide receiver I've seen. I mean, I don't know too many teams that are so stacked that their number 4 wide receivers as good as him, as versatile as him. So obviously the tight end position is a huge question mark with the release of Eric Ebron and the running back position, which kind of hurts us. I mean, I know we did address tight end early in the draft last year. I want to say with Roberts.
Yep, Michael Roberts, one of my big crushes last year. I loved him.
Right.
He has a lot of potential. And then they brought in Luke Wilson, and
they did.
So they've got tight ends that can do what they need to do. They've got an F tight end to stretch the field. They've got 2 blocking tight ends. And so they have bodies to do what they want to do. And a lot of those Ebron targets should just shift right to Kenny Galladay. I mean, it should be a very natural transition. Right. Losing Ebron isn't going to be as devastating, I think, as people think, because the Lions have the ability to put 3 and 4 wide receiver sets out there without an issue. And if you want a blocking tight end or you want multiple running backs on the field, they're going to be able to take that impact of losing Ebron a lot easier than people think.
Right. Yeah. Just the ability to keep the middle of the field honest with Galladay, and even keeping those linebackers at bay because you're worried about Theo. I've always kind of battled back and forth in my head because I've always felt that while I love Theo Riddick, I almost felt like Amir would slide well into that third down back, receiving back role as well. It just really comes down to, and the reason why is I think Theo's a better receiving back than Amir. Don't get me wrong. I think Amir Abdullah's miles better as a running back.
Yes.
And which is why when I was thinking, when we're bringing in another guy, I think Amir might be – I mean, they don't really pass protect too much. I feel like Amir's better than Theo at pass protection, but that's not something I've studied.
They're both really good. And as far as PFF grades them both out as top 10 guys.
Okay.
So they're both very good pass protectors.
Right. So we have that. If we slide another guy in, I'm worried about trying to do too much. Now, Theo is the kind of guy that can split out in these 2 back sets and play in the slot, just kind of mess with motion and pre-snap movement. Do you feel like bringing in a running back means Amir's gone? Because not only that, we have a guy like Dwayne Washington, who they keep trying to push as the goal line back, but who has shown flashes, especially when Amir was hurt and Theo was hurt and Zach Zenner wasn't getting the job done. We moved on from Zach, or is Zach still on the roster?
They re-signed him. They re-signed him on a cheap deal.
That might mean Washington's on the way out. What do you feel is the key to this running back group? Should we just stick it out and see how it works? Should we try bringing in a third, fourth round guy, or are there other needs on the team?
No, I absolutely think they were going to bring in a guy in the third or fourth round. I think you've hit the four main needs of this team. It's defensive line, edge rushing, that left guard spot, and then a running back. If they can hit those four in some manner in those first 4 rounds, they're going to come out of this draft happy. And I think they're going to add a guy. Now, the thing that Theo's a good running back, and he's good at in the pass catching role. You get him in space, he can be lethal. I do think Amir can do a lot of the same things like you said, and I do agree he's a better runner. He gets hammered, as you mentioned, by a lot of good people, but remember, he had a Liz Frank injury on his foot, and that takes time. And he was only less than a year off of that injury last year, and you could see that it impacted some of his explosiveness. Now he's another year removed. If it's possible that he regains some of that explosiveness. If he doesn't, he could be in trouble. But I don't think. I think he's making it all the way to camp. I think he's got a good edge in order to get snaps in some manner. Right. Blunt is, he's that big, powerful running back, but Blunt is more, he's more elusive than a power back. I know he gets that label of a power back because he's so big, but he's very elusive, and that fits in with like what Theo does and what Amir does. And if we look at like the system that Patricia's come from and the offense that he's studied and been part of with the Patriots, is they use 4 running backs that basically are very similar but have a few different things that make them unique. And the Lions have 3 guys that are similar in their elusivity. But they do things unique. Blunt can be more powerful. Theo can be more of that pass catcher. Amir can be in that pass catching role, but he can be a better rusher. Now, you've got 3 guys that I think you're sold on. So you do need a 4th. Now, could it be Dwayne Washington? Maybe. But Dwayne Washington has a hard time finding the hole. His vision is poor. And he's got all the athletic ability in the world, and ideally he could fit right in there. But there's no guarantees he's going to learn how to see. You have Tion Green, who was your power back last year. He could end up, if they don't address it, he's probably your 4th guy right now because he brings that power element. And then you have Zenner, and I think Zenner will fit better in this system than in the previous ones. But again, he was a healthy inactive for most of last year. So there's no guarantee those bottom 3 guys are going to make the roster. So you are definitely looking at that 3rd and 4th round range. It's just a matter of who falls where. Right. If you have a guy like Kerryon Johnson who has a fall and he's there in the 3rd, they just brought him in for a visit in the Allen Park just last week. There's there's about 7 running backs that I like in the first 100 picks. And if one of them is there when they pick at 82, I could easily see them taking it. Right. If they don't take a guy in the 3rd, I think you could get a guy like Nyheim Hines out of NC State, right. who is
very speedy guy.
Yeah, and he's very much like what they have. He's got a lot of those same abilities. He's not gonna be that power back guy, but he can catch, he can run. He's got the one thing that the Lions are lacking is they don't have a home run hitter. They like as good as Riddick and Abdullah and Blunt can be. None of them are going to touch the ball and take it to the house. Like they're going to get caught. They just don't have that long speed. They're good in space, but Hines he could be that home run guy. If Royce Freeman finds his way to the 3rd day, I know Freeman's a guy that they like. He could be in the mix. One of my favorites is Jalen Samuels, the other NC State running back, kind of H-back. I think he would be phenomenal. Right. Both Hines and Samuels, they meet their full qualifiers in my system. So they would be good guys. One of my sleeper guys is John Kelly. John Kelly out of Tennessee. He's from Detroit. Played his ball at Tennessee, backed up Kamara last year. He's a guy who runs similarly to Blunt, except he's just smaller. But he's a guy who I think, again, fits a lot of what they're doing. He and Freeman are both partial qualified.
Oh, I'm lagging here. I think we lost Erik. Hold on one second.
Hey,
Hey,
I don't know what happened.
We'll edit that out.
Okay.
Sorry, but you're talking about John Kelly.
Yeah, and so John Kelly's another guy that I think, is kind of a sleeper, that if he's there in the fourth round, which seems very likely, he could be a guy that they bring in, add to the mix, and he could eventually be the starter. He's got that type of a ceiling. So a handful of guys that they can find that they can fit into a four-man rotation. And, I like a lot of the top running backs, but I've been told to kind of temper my expectations on them, that the Lions are really looking at one guy early, and if they don't take him, which they probably aren't, then they're going to be looking at a handful of these guys in that third, fourth round.
Right. I think the Blunt, Amir, Riddick teamed with a healthy Galladay really allow us to do what we want to do. I'm all right with bringing in a guy like Royce Freeman or a later round running back, but I don't think at the second round we need to be jumping at anybody too early. I mean, guys that can fall, Sony Michel, are the kind of guys that can fall to the late second. But I agree with you. I don't think we need to be jumping up and grabbing those kind of guys. I don't know where Ron Jones is, but once again, yeah, running back, I think we're fine. I think you were talking about Tion, Zach, and Dwayne Washington. I think the guy that makes that team is Tion, and I say that purely because of special teams ability. Because when we're talking about running back 4, running back 5, we're looking at what kind of guy can commit on special teams. Dwayne Washington obviously was the returner for a while, but I think we saw a shift to TJ Jones being more of the return man later, especially on punts, Tate doing that role. So I think Agnew, right? What am I talking about? Jamal Agnew. Right. I just remember when Amir was doing punts and punt returns, and he would fumble, that Tate would be the guy that they just kind of threw in there, like, all right, we need you to catch the ball, so just do your thing.
I think Amir can be their kick returner this year.
I think so too.
As good as Agnew is on punts, he's not as effective as a kick returner. But Amir was an excellent kick returner. Took one to the house as a rookie, and so I think Amir, especially if they're going to use him in a rotational role, they're going to look to incorporate him into special teams, and that is a very natural spot for him. Him in Agnew would be a really nice return unit. Right,
exactly. I mean, Theo Riddick is James White, and Amir Abdullah is Dion Lewis, returning kicks and playing rotational snaps as a running back who can catch the ball out of the backfield. So, I mean, the Patriot system works. So I have a lot of faith in Bob Quinn. So I personally am an Amir Abdullah fan ever since his first touch in a game when he juked Eric Weddle out of his shoes. So I know it's there. He's got good vision. I do like you moving back to you mentioned before, moving back to a zone look. Zone block scheme, because that's what Amir naturally is, a guy with great acceleration, maybe not high-end speed, but good vision, great cuts, gets north and south very quickly. I think that's perfect for a guy like Amir versus following pulling guards and that kind of deal in a power run scheme. It's not necessarily.
It's going to be interesting to see, because we may get a shift in scheme because they replaced their offensive line coach and they brought in Davidson, and so but Davidson's run a lot of different schemes. But the way this offensive line is built, it sure seems like they're going to be a zone scheme, just from an athletic standpoint.
Right. So let's expand over here to the division. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. I don't think you can ever say that guy leading the team healthy doesn't make them a favorite. But the loss of Jordy Nelson hurts. But the gaining of possibly one of the greatest receiving tight ends ever sure helps. Minnesota, obviously, a game away from the Super Bowl last year. Go and grab a guy like Kirk Cousins. Do you feel that team is still a contender with Kirk. What are your thoughts on Kirk as a guy? I know everybody kind of jumps back and forth. Do you feel? I've always felt like they need to have the expectation of we're a year away, not this year, especially with a guy like Kirk. Just give it time. And especially if Dalvin Cook comes back. But what are your thoughts on that?
I think Minnesota is probably the front runner in this division. I think, getting as far as they did in the playoffs is a big deal. I think losing their offensive coordinator to the Giants was potentially a problem, but they ended up getting Philly's quarterback coach. I'm blanking on his name right now, so they brought in a new offensive coordinator, DeFilippo, that was from Philly. So they replaced their guys that they lost. They lose a quarterback, they bring in Cousins. They lose their offensive coordinator, they bring in another guy. Their defense is really good, and I think Minnesota has a lot of the right things in place to make this really their division to lose at this point. I think the Lions want to be in it, but I think they've had Green Bay's number recently, but Green Bay's still, like you said, they're still Green Bay. They still have Aaron Rodgers. They still have one of the best quarterbacks in the game, and so if they have a good draft, which they typically do, there's a real chance for them to come back. But they have a lot more holes, and they're getting older, and I feel like Green Bay is kind of at a tipping point where they could potentially have a few more years left in making their run before they start having guys even just beyond Aaron Rodgers getting older and beyond him needing to get paid in a year. A lot of their other players are either they can't stay healthy or they're getting up in age. And so I feel like Green Bay's they've got a lot more holes than they have in the past. So they're going to need to do something to kind of, right the ship and be a contender. But I still think it's Minnesota's division. I'm not considering the Bears anything at this point. I like a lot of what they're doing. I just don't think they're a strong enough team. If they come away with another good draft, that's great. But their quarterback is still developing. He's still a ways away from really doing anything, in my opinion. There was a reason that he didn't play half the year in Mitch Trubisky, but he flashed some good talent. They have some guys around them, but I feel like they're just kind of meshed together, and they haven't proven to me that they can consistently be a good team at this point. But I like the way that they're heading. I feel like the division as a whole is heading in the right direction, and it's going to be a strong team or a strong division. It's just it's just going to look a little different than it has in the past.
Right. I personally am high on Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah, the reason why is I've always, how do you win football games? You run the ball and you play good defense.
Sure.
Now, the Bears, I believe, lost Pernell McPhee this offseason, which, he's always been a very talented guy on that front seven. I really like that secondary.
Yeah.
I think we were just kind of, as Lions fans, we know our Fuller didn't really work out. So, it's very kind of unfair, but Kyle Fuller really came into his own last year. Amos and Eddie Jackson shredded it last year. Amos
love Eddie Jackson.
Really, played really, really good football. Leonard Floyd is, developing into his pass rushing role. And if they maintain the top 5 defense they had last year and really force turnovers like they were, and Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen continue to do what they do, they might be a year or two away because of the new offensive coordinator, or the new coaching staff, the new folks to implement it with a young quarterback. Because you just had a guy learn for a year under one guy, and now he's got to go and kind of restart that process. But having Allen Robinson and Taylor Gabriel really make that process a lot easier. So it's just one of those things but we've seen it before, right? We've seen it happen where guys go and grab flashy free agents, and we're like, oh, that's the dream team. That's the team that's going to come out and win a division now. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Right. It's going to take a minute. And so I think it really depends on how long Trubisky comes this offseason. I don't see them winning the division.
Yep.
I agree with you. I think Minnesota, barring Kirk Cousins, being completely different than how he's been for the last 3 seasons, I think Minnesota is the favorite. I see the Lions finishing second, and I say that because, like you said, Green Bay is really getting older. and with age comes injuries. And
Yep.
Especially if Aaron goes down again, they're instantly at the bottom of the division, in my opinion. We've seen
Yes.
DeShone Kaiser play. I'm not impressed. I think the Bears could be a third, be a 9-10 win team this season.
Wow.
That's high end, that's high end. But
Yeah.
I really think they could be a 9-10 win season. But I don't think that's enough to make the playoffs. I mean, I think LA is obviously the favorite up there in on the West. If we go Minnesota, East, Philly. Philly really is the favorite there.
Sure.
You can pick. Then we get to the South. We have 3 guys that easily could be, the number 1 seed and then turn around and be both wild cards. They've done it. Pretty much the last couple seasons. So Saints, Falcons, Panthers, pick a day. They could be different who you think is going to win that division. Yeah. But I think because of the 2 remaining for the South, the Seahawks are always, I know they've gone through a major shift. The Niners are a team that can really surprise a lot of people. So I don't think the Bears are going to be in contention for the playoffs unless Trubisky just comes out and defies all sophomore slump tradition. But I like Trubisky. I think he's a smart guy. Working with what he had last year it's tough to watch. I like Joshua Bellamy in Madden, but Josh Bellamy is not quite there. Letting Cameron Meredith go, I don't know how I feel, but maybe I'm high on them. Maybe I'm high on the Bears, but who knows? So I'm looking here at your tweet 5 hours ago. Was probably a little bit longer than that. You said this is how you change your defense quickly. This is back to the draft. Vita V. Grabbing a jack linebacker. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that name.
Okoronkwo?
Yep.
I think that's who it was.
Right. And then you have us addressing Will in the third with Jannard Avery. Who's Jannard Avery? Kind of give me a 2.
He's out of Memphis.
Okay.
He played like an off linebacker role, but he also blitzed off the edge. He's a little bit small for what the Lions would look for, but he has that capability. I think he would come in. He could push Christian Jones for that Will spot, if not take it over.
Got you. And then Royce Freeman, obviously we talked about him earlier. Yeah, man, I think you're on the right track. I agree with
that.
You.
That was actually a mock draft that was put out by DraftWire. Luke Easterling, who runs DraftWire, he did a 4-round mock draft this morning, and those were the 4 picks that he picked for the Lions.
Gotcha.
And so I think if you added a linebacker, a pass rusher, and a defensive tackle, look, your defense is going to be in a lot better shape. Yes, you don't have that guard, which we talked about as one of the top 4 needs, but I'd be okay. I'd be okay with it. They need linebackers. Linebackers are massive in Patricia's system. So if you can give me 2 linebackers, one of them being a pass rusher, really both of them can be really good pass rushers. I think that would be a huge step towards this defense becoming a little bit more legit. This offense is you can add 2 players on offense, and then everything else should be dedicated to defense.
I agree. We need to go defense heavy.
Yeah.
We didn't have too flashy of an off season in terms of free agent pickups, but I agree with the Quinn movement. I think that he picked up guys like Luke Wilson that can come in and blind guys. He knows what they can do. Patricia has worked with at least a couple of these guys before. A lot of connections. Interested to see where we go in the first. I need to have you back on, man. Let me tell you about this thing I got going on it's called Monday Night Football Companion. I don't know what I'm going to name it yet. I don't want to do Finn and Friends or something cheesy like that. But pretty much what's going to happen is I'm going to live stream every Monday night during a Monday Night Football game. I know with Gruden gone, I like Kurt Warner. That seems to be the guy that they have fill in the booth that they like, but not a lot of people like listening to commentators. I'd like to have some special guests on. I'd love to have you on the show. I know I've talked to Jeff. I know I've talked to a lot of guys, but pretty much the idea of the setup is we just live stream. You pop in when you can. If you got to go, no big deal. It's not a dedicated podcast. And we just watch. We talk. We shoot the shit. We talk football. We kind of recap what happened on Sunday, commentate on the Monday night game. But one of the big things that I'm excited for is this thing I'm going to call Called It. And pretty much what happens is we try and play Tony Romo throughout the game. And what it is, say me and you are watching the game, and I say, all right, 3rd and 4, they're running, they're just going to run a slant here, a quick rub route to so-and-so. If I get it, I get a point. If I miss the play, if I'm off, I take a shot. So I just get progressively drunker throughout the game. And then at the end, after all the points are totaled up, we'll have to, we'll do something cheesy, like, some kind of like little bet, something to do on Twitter, or maybe make a video or something. I mean, it's not like we have opposing teams, so there's not any, you don't have to like wear an Aaron Rodgers jersey to work for a day or something like that. But something like that, man. And I think that would be fun. They could kind of change the game up a little bit. Because everybody's so bent on like having an article out. So when the third, fourth quarter rolls around, they're just typing away and just hoping nothing changes too drastically. So where they have to rewrite it, and then game's over and an article's out. But over here at the Mi Casa Su Casa Network, I really don't have to. I've been asked to kind of do the podcasting show, so it's kind of a little bit more laid back. I don't have to do any writing, which is
yeah. That was one of the hardest parts of writing for the Lions in 2016 was if you'd have to trash your article because they had so many of those late last minute comebacks in 2008. Oh, it was devastating.
Like what the Lions did wrong and why we lost, and you're like, Matt.
And I'm not as quick of a writer as some of the other guys, so it takes me a little bit longer to formulate exactly what I'm trying to articulate. But so those late comebacks, those are hard on me. I struggle with those. I like it when it's when they're way ahead or way behind.
Right, but we don't have those. And anytime it does, you see the same tweets from everybody on Lions Twitter where it's like, this happens, you're allowed to win by more than 14 points.
Yeah, what happened like once last year?
Once a year, yeah. We get the heartaches. Bringing up the Falcons game earlier just gave me a little pain in my chest. I had to get away from that topic as soon as I could with that ruling coming in. So, but yeah, man, really enjoyed having you on the show today.
Thanks,
guys. If you watched all the way through, which probably 4 of you did, please follow Erik on Twitter at Erik. That's ERIKSCHLITT. We could do this in military echo Roman. No, I'm just kidding. Follow him. Look into his. Say it again. The Quip. What is it?
It's a Quip system, the Quinn Influenced Benchmark system. I incorporate it in my writing, my draft preview articles at Lions Wire. So any of my preview articles that are up and coming up, I just incorporate it as part to show if the guy's fit or not.
Awesome. Yeah, check that stuff out. Go check Kenley Platt's RAS score if you're really into guys like Byron Jones and Chris Conley. That'll really get you going. Thank you, Erik, again for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, buddy.
All right.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Yep.